Welcome back to Without Shortcuts. Before we get started today, I just wanted to ask you, did you hear about that explosion at the French cheese factory?
I did not hear anything about that.
Oh man, it was terrible. There was nothing left but debris.
Of course.
In all seriousness, today we are going to show you how to make a dipping sauce that's cheesier than that joke.
I don't think anything is cheesier than that joke. This sauce we're going to throw together is just a nice, easy cheese sauce, beer cheese sauce actually. We're making this in order to go with our pretzels, and we're going to taste all of it at the same time, which is going to be next week's video. So to see exactly how this finishes up, come back next week, check out some pretzels, and then see how they taste all together.
So like Doug said, it's just a handful of ingredients. We've got just about 2 cups, maybe a little bit more of Jarlsberg cheese. There's a 1.5 cups of milk with a 1/2 cup of heavy cream in there, about half an onion diced up, a couple cloves of garlic, some butter, and then just the adult beverage of your choice.
This sauce is nice and easy to put together. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to take about 2 tablespoons of butter. We're going to put it into our pan and let that start melting down. Once your butter is melted, get just a few of those bubbles out of the way, then you're going to take your little bit of diced onion, you're going to put that right into the butter. Just like that. Let that saute up a little bit. When the onions are nice and fragrant and they're just starting to get a little bit transparent, then you're going to want to add your garlic in. Don't add your garlic in right at the beginning because your garlic will burn and you don't want that. So we are just going to crush it. You could certainly dice this if that is easier or you don't have a crusher. Whatever works, you just want nice small pieces right into your pan with the onions. And then we used about 2 tablespoons of butter at the beginning to cook this with. And then we've got about another 1 tablespoon worth of cornstarch that's already sprinkled over the top of the cheese. So in order to make the roux, we're just going to add 1 tablespoon of flour directly into our onions and garlic. And that's going to combine with the butter. And we're going to cook those all together until you can no longer smell just the raw flour. Like, it'll be very noticeable. It just takes maybe
90 seconds or a little less
to just cook that all out and make sure that you've got a good base for your sauce. And if you've timed it well, you'll see your onions, your garlic, all of that starts taking on just that nice little brown color, all at the same time that the flour gets cooked out and is ready to go. Perfect, right there. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add in a little bit of nice dark beer. That's just going to pull all these flavors together and make sure all those starches are ready to go when we start adding our
milk and cream.
We're going to add about 3/4 of the bottle. This isn't a full batch, but since we're doing it with our pretzels, we want that nice strong beer flavor to go with it. Then we're just going to stir those together and let that come back up to a nice little boil. Doesn't need to be like a rolling boil, you just want to make sure that that's nice and hot. Let that alcohol cook off as well. There we go. As that comes up to a nice boil, you'll notice it starts to thicken up, which is exactly what you want. Turn the heat down just a little bit so that it's not quite so aggressive of a boil. Then we're going to take our cold milk and cream, and you want to whisk this the whole time, and you're just going to pour it in very, very slowly and just whisk it in together. Take your time, nice and slow. Get it all in there, stir it up, and then again let this come back up to a nice little boil. Don't let it go too long without stirring it or it'll scorch the bottom pretty quickly and that'll ruin your whole batch. So just kind of keep an eye on it, stir it up as needed. As it warms up, it'll start to thicken up also, so you'll know that it's getting close. You can see it's starting to bubble nicely here. You want this to come up to a full boil on this so that all the starches get hot enough to make sure you're getting everything nice and thick. When it starts boiling, make sure you're stirring it so it doesn't scorch. And when it's bubbling even through you stirring it, that means you've got it warm enough. And before you add your cheese, turn your heat off completely. Keep stirring it just a little bit until the bubbling goes away. If you don't wait for it to stop boiling, then your sauce will split and it'll get nice and grainy, which is not ideal. So heat off. Stir a little, and it should come down. There we go. So with just the residual heat in the pan, we're going to use that to melt our cheese. So like I said, this cheese already has cornstarch on it, which is going to act as the rest of the thickening agent, and it's also going to make sure that everything holds together and combines nicely into a nice smooth sauce instead of breaking and having, you know, some of the oils on top and the cheese. It can be a whole disaster. So a little bit of starch on your cheese, and then just in small handfuls, we're going to add that in. We'll stir that little bit in until it melts and is nice and smooth before we add the rest. There we go, nice and smooth, nothing but the onions in there for a little bit of texture. Add a little bit more of our cheese. This is a small batch, so we can probably add the rest of it right now. Okay, that's all melted. I'm going to add just a little bit of heat to it to make sure we get it nice and smooth. You don't want to add any salt yet because cheeses have varying degrees of salt in them. But we definitely know we're going to want some fresh black pepper. So we'll add that in. Then we'll taste it and see if it needs any more salt. Tiny bit of salt, but not very much. That Jarlsberg is pretty salty to begin with. We'll just put a little sprinkle in there. It's starting to bubble again, so we'll turn the heat off. We'll stir that salt in. Perfect. And we will call that the beer cheese sauce that we're going to dip our pretzels in next week. So come back, check that recipe out, and we'll show you how this turns out. Thanks, guys.